Hi everyone, welcome to the September virtual road trip. I see people jumping on and we've got quite a few who are registered, so we'll give it a few minutes for you all to get settled and comfortable, get your cup of tea or water, and be ready to settle in and learn about Reading to Connect. So you're getting on, I see, very quickly. So we'll just wait just a few minutes. All right, slowing down a little bit. So welcome everyone again to the September virtual road trip. It's hard to believe, I'm sure for all of you, as it is for us, that it actually is September and we're moving into fall, which is great. It's just been a year that we will never forget, right? Welcome everyone. I'm Pam Brandon. I'm the president and founder of AGE-u-cate Training Institute. And for those of you who are new to our road trip, a little bit about AGE-u-cate. We develop and deliver effective, research-based, innovative aging and dementia training for professional and family caregivers. Our programs are implemented in over 800 communities and agencies across the US, Canada, and Australia. Some of our family of programs include Dementia Live, which is our simulation and empathy training program, Compassionate Touch, which is our skilled touch program to help those with dementia and improve the quality of life and well-being for those through skilled touch techniques. Flashback is our engaging reminiscence program, and Ageless Grace is our fun brain and body fitness program. And we're very excited that Reading to Connect is going to be added to our family of programs. And so I'm delighted to be able to introduce Susan Ostrowski, who is the co-creator of the Reading to Connect organization. Susan and I began working together last year after meeting and looking at her program. It was just exactly a perfect fit for the mission that we have for our programs, and she is a passionate advocate and leader in this field. So a little bit more about Susan before I turn it over to her. The Reading to Connect organization is devoted to integrating ability-appropriate reading into the lives of elders and adults with dementia. Susan has had many published articles. She is really well-versed in the area of reading and reading needs for those with dementia. She is the 2020 recipient of the National American Speech and Hearing Association Clinical Achievement Award. And again, her passion is just overflowing in her every facet of the Reading to Connect program. She envisions a world in which personalized, accessible, recreational reading is an integral part of aging for everyone. We just love it. We love her program. So I am very delighted to have you, Susan. Welcome. We've been looking forward to being able to share this. And so I am going to turn it over to Susan, who, by the way, is in Connecticut. So that is where we're traveling today. So Susan, I'm going to let you take it from here and share with everybody about Reading to Connect.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. You know, I understand how busy people are, and I really want to make this well worth your time. So what I aim for in this talk is a mix of paradigm shifting and practical application. And I very much hope that people walk away feeling that they got these two things in some way to some degree. As Pam said, I'm co-creator and director of Reading to Connect. Please feel free to reach out to Pam and AGE-u-cate and me anytime with questions, insights, discoveries on today's topic. In this session, I'll be talking to you about the hidden reading capacities of people living with dementia and how specialized reading material can revive not only their ability to read, but their minds and voices. I'll be staying pretty much within the context of long-term care, memory care, skilled nursing, etc. However, the content of this talk certainly goes beyond long-term care. So today we're going to address 3 questions. What is the relationship between reading and dementia? Or put another way, can people with dementia read? What does age-friendly and dementia-friendly reading material look like? And how do we benefit from reading? How does reading for pleasure elevate us, texturize, deepen, and expand our lives, especially for people living with dementia or in long-term care? Before we address the first question, let's acknowledge the state of affairs in long-term senior care these days. In the literature that talks about changing the culture of aging, there's often mention of 3 emotional plagues that many older adults, especially those living with dementia, are experiencing. These 3 psychosocial states are boredom, helplessness, and loneliness. Now, this is a jarring image, and hopefully most long-term care communities don't look like this. However, even in the nicest looking care communities, residents are at great risk of experiencing overwhelming boredom, helplessness, loneliness, as well as depression, anxiety, frustration, etc. We can address this unacceptable
medical records and
state
admissions
of
coordinator.
affairs in many ways, such as changing policy and increasing funding. We should also be working to offer residents the things that they see as life enriching, the things that they see as critical to their happiness, like music, art, animals, yoga, gardens, children. And so we wonder, can books be added to that list of life-enriching, self-affirming elements? Can reading be part of the answer to making sure that every person living with cognitive changes experiences psychosocial health and well-being? If so, then we come back to the question, what is the relationship between reading and dementia? Let's begin by looking at where the skill of reading is stored in the human memory. This is an artificial construct of memory. As you can see, our long-term memory consists of different subtypes, one of them being implicit memory. Implicit memory stores unconscious processes, such as recalling the words to a song. Excuse me. Procedural memory is the unconscious how-to part of memory and stores skills like using utensils and reading. Procedural memories are typically acquired through repetition and practice and are so deeply embedded that dementia generally does not significantly impact these skills until the disease process is quite far along. Can we then conclude that the ability to read is retained and intact for most?
Thank you for calling Notre Dame Healthcare and Rehab Center.
Let's look at how reading is formally assessed in the typical
at this
adult
time by appointment only.
evaluations and
We
see
have set up virtual communication and phones to keep in touch with your loved ones.
this is a typical
Please visit
test
our
item
website
assessing
at
written word comprehension.
www.NotreDameHealthcare.org or
Unfortunately,
Notre
I can tell you
Dame
from years
Healthcare
of
Facebook
experience
page
that most
for
people living
further communication options with your loved
with
ones.
these
Thank
items
you for your continued cooperation as we work to
Does
keep your loved ones safe during this time.
meaningless tasks,
For operator
meaning
assistance,
that people
press
in long-term
0 or
care
remain on the
don't
line.
read. Let's look at what research tells us. Research centered on the reading capacities of people in long-term care is scant. However, the few studies out there do raise the possibility that the skill of reading is affected by dementia more than is conventionally assumed. An article in the Journal of International Neuropsychological Society referring to individuals living with dementia states, it is found that although performance on the National Adult Reading Test does decline gradually over time, the deterioration on formal tests of IQ is more rapid and more severe. Also, Dr. Michelle Bourgeois, a renowned researcher in the field of dementia and reading, writes, All of my research demonstrates that people who were literate maintain their ability to read until the end stages of dementia. Now, as a side note, Dr. Bourgeois' findings have been enormously influential in addressing reading for functional purposes, like lexical memory cards. These things are good for aiding memory and maintaining independence with daily activities. However, reading for the sheer joy of reading just for pleasure, is an area of dementia research that is virtually non-existent. Now let's think about what elders and people living with dementia are showing us in day-to-day real-life situations about their reading abilities, and see if that sheds some light on this issue. What we often see in our work is residents who are living in the advanced stages of their disease and who have very little language spontaneously reading aloud prominent signage like this. However, we also see that most individuals in the early stages of the disease stop reading. We often see individuals who use spoken language very well, attempting to read a magazine and then putting the magazine aside, often with a look of despondency. Compiling these different perspectives, we see that the relationship between reading and dementia appears to be murky, puzzling, and not well understood. So let's put aside this first question for a moment, and let's move on to the second question, which is, what does age-friendly and dementia-friendly reading material look like? To help answer this question, let me introduce you to Jeffrey. Jeff is a gentleman who has difficulties producing language and remembering. From this video, you get a sense of the intensity of his struggles to express himself, his disfluency, his word-finding problems, and his frustration. This is a clip of Jeffrey attempting to describe an event.
I just wanted to mention that Peter got his boat out, and he's had out with his boat, rather, and
now I'd like to show you how he reads. In this next clip, this is the newspaper page I offered him. I suggested to him an article about trees because he's a biologist, a Harvard-educated PhD biologist, and he absolutely loves being outdoors. Here's a video of him attempting to read the article aloud. Note his defeatist body language and facial expression before he even starts to read. It's evident that the newspaper appears disorderly, inaccessible, and overwhelming to him.
Nature's ancient history. The biggest challenge in photography, the biggest challenge in photographing ancient trees can be finding them when the
As you saw, Jeff was really struggling to sound out the words, to visually track, and to read the words in the correct sequence. He most likely had very little cognitive resources left for actually comprehending the text. You can see why Jeff and his family affirm that Jeff could no longer read for pleasure. The reading process was much too arduous to be sustained in any practical way. This is what I offered him next. This is the exact same article in terms of words and sentences, but as you can see, the appearance is radically different. There are no irrelevant distractions. The margins are wide, and the very white paper and the black bold print make for high visual contrast. Most newspaper, book, and magazine print is dark gray on light gray paper, making for very poor visual contrast, and therefore that much harder to read for aging populations. This video clip is Jeffrey reading the adapted article. Before he begins to read, note again his body language and facial expression. How does he feel looking at this article, as opposed to how he felt when he saw the article in the newspaper?
The biggest challenge in photographing ancient trees can be finding them. When the California-based photographer Beth Moon set out to capture some of the Earth's oldest trees, she found herself hiking up steep mountains, scrambling over rocks, and walking for hours, just your style. Scrambling over rocks, walking for hours down roads where cars couldn't go. She showcases her findings from the past 14 years in a book, Ancient Trees.
So when this article was presented like this, Jeff was able to read for pleasure on his own. He was able to comprehend and enjoy an article from the Wall Street Journal. While reading, he was even able to interject a humorous comment referring to our past discussions about me walking and running my dog through the woods and occasionally tripping. This demonstration of comprehension and simultaneous processing shows that the altered print format made the reading process automatic and almost effortless for Jeff. This adapted print format is an energy conservation measure for Jeffrey, enabling him to sail through a typical newspaper article. This is an example of someone who has deficits in reading related skills. For instance, selective attention, eye muscle control, and simultaneous processing, but whose actual ability to read is intact. When Jeff and his family and staff discovered very quickly is that adapted reading material, like the article on the right, gave Jeff enjoyable experiences of self-confidence, grace, human connection, and humor. On a side note, Jeffrey was like countless others who miserably failed these formal reading evaluation tasks and was therefore viewed as someone who could no longer read. Clearly, as a field, we are not getting this right. We are not making correct conclusions about residents' abilities to read. Let's look at other ways we can modify text to make it readable to more people living with cognitive changes. Here's an original published article from The Atlantic on photographing shipwrecks. To make it accessible to more readers, this article contains more adaptations than Jeffrey's adapted article. This article was formatted to have less text per page and a more spacious outlet, facilitating a slower rate of reading. You can see this article has images to break up the hard work of language processing and to reinforce the content. The text of this article consists of relatively short sentences with simple sentence structure. In addition, there are less references, less details, and less proper nouns. Nonetheless, the integrity and the intelligence of the writing, the vocabulary, and the content are not compromised in any way. It is age appropriate. Here's an example of a page from a dementia-friendly book, one that we've produced at Reading to Connect, with more modifications, making it accessible to more aging adult readers. This is a booklet about the Korean War. Carefully designed elements of this book compensate for significant cognitive, visual, and language decline. For one, the paper is thick for easy turning, and of course, bright white for high visual contrast. Secondly, the graphic layout is more spacious to allow for easy visual tracking and to not appear overwhelming. Thirdly, while the vocabulary and the content are age appropriate, the sentences are short and direct and with a simple sentence structure. In addition, space between sentences cues the reader to pause after each sentence. With the standalone sentences, we often see readers read a sentence, pause, look at the image, and then reread the sentence. Standalone sentences allow for real comprehension and thoughtful reading. Finally, the illustrations are a critical component. Images that are colorful, bold, inviting, and easy to discern help sustain the reader's attention and keep them on topic. So we begin to crack open that very first question, can people with dementia read? We see that a resident's ability to read is dependent on such elements as the appearance, layout, and syntax of the text. For the sake of aging populations and for our future selves, we need to broaden and expand our concept of what reading material can look like. Reading material does not have to be either this or this. There can be a rich array of adult material in between. Aging or acquiring dementia should not mean inevitably entering into a literary abyss just because typical published material is no longer accessible. Although creating age dementia-friendly reading material is doable, it does take skill and time. Most activity and care staff don't have excess time to do this. One option is to solicit others to create specialized, personalized reading material for the residents. I've seen activity directors guide volunteers, students, and family members in creating and providing excellent reading material for residents. Continuing on with the question, what does quality age-friendly and dementia-friendly reading material look like? Let's talk about content. Early on in our work, we found that if a book was boring or obvious or childish or uninspiring, aging readers put it right down. This readership recognizes insipid, silly content instantly. They, like anyone else, require, expect, and deserve age-level, worthwhile content that has energy and novelty. In addition to high-quality content, accessible books must not be overwhelming in length. The books must be manageable. For most of our books at Reading to Connect, they're about 20 pages long, 10 pages of images and 10 pages text. But this isn't a formula. This is what we found works quite often. So therefore, for adults who can no longer read typical published material, we aim for what I call brevity with impact. Here are a few more examples of what I mean by brief but impactful. This is one of our books entitled Rocks and Romance. It combines history with beauty, fun, and learning. This is one of our books about coffee, which has some interesting, delightful stories about a drink that many of us hold dear to our hearts. Some of the books we've created are warm, cozy, and comforting. As you can see, the content can be inviting and appealing in many different ways and still be age appropriate, all without too much text on one page. Dr. Josie Billington from the University of Liverpool is the director of the Center for Research into Reading. She has conducted extensive research into the benefits of reading for pleasure for a variety of population groups, including readers with dementia. When writing about adapted reading, such as the examples we've seen here, for people in long-term care, she states, reading helps to introduce or reconnect readers to wider life systems and more broadly shared meanings. She further writes, reading can also remind people of activities or occupations they once pursued. It can remind them of knowledge and skills they still possess, helping to restore their sense of place and purpose in the world. These are invaluable gifts for the people we serve. A book can be historic, bringing back significant events in one's life. Again, saying a lot with few words. And of course, humor is always well received. All to say, age-friendly and dementia-friendly reading material should involve an alternative text, but never a diminished one. Continuing on, let's stretch our concept of what reading material is supposed to look like even further. What about people who have great difficulty processing language, people who are chronically confused? This is an example of a page from an adapted book that has minimal text. This content is familiar and warm. It can stir positive feelings and elicit responses, even if every word isn't comprehended precisely. Again, brevity with impact. In this example, these few words and image can bring a flood. In this example, these words and image can bring a flood of pleasant emotions and memories. When thinking about reading for people living in the advanced stages of dementia, we want to broaden and soften, in a sense, our preconceptions about the reading process. One conventional definition of reading is simply text influencing thought. However, when I'm sitting closely with an aging adult and I see them interacting with the material, my ideas about reading become more fluid. In this context, I like to think about reading as text and images influencing thoughts and feelings. Often we don't know what people are processing or comprehending, but I think we should focus less on, are they really reading? And focus more on, are they being affected in a positive way by the print material? Are they enjoying it? Here's another example with only 5 words, but its simplicity and beauty can be rich with meaning. Let's view another video depicting how minimal accessible print can enhance the quality of a resident's day. This is Bobby. On this day, as most days, Bobby has been guided to the fireplace area after lunch while CNAs assist other residents. Bobby is perpetually disoriented and has great difficulty understanding language. It's safe to say at this moment in this photograph, she was probably feeling alone and confused, wondering where she was, what was to happen next, and where are the people whom she loves. This is the cover of the book that she's looking at in the video. This is the page she's looking at when she softly says, "Sweet." Please pardon the very noisy background in this video. It's unfortunately a typical skilled nursing environment.
You okay?
Hi, Bobby.
You just move that tray apart. I mean, you'd be perfect for her. Thank you, Kim.
It's me, Susan. Glad to see you, Bobby. I thought of you when I saw this.
Somebody wanted to see me before Bob and I leave.
This lady right here.
Because I know you
Okay, let me
like
get her for
birds.
you. Your bag is here. She might be on lunch.
Right?
Oh, don't bring her from the office.
No, you want to get her. Let's get her.
This one.
This is the second time I've purchased something on Walmart.com, and
That's what it says, sweet.
I haven't ordered.
After we had some time together and it appeared that Bobby was enjoying this book, I left her on her own. A little while later, someone took this photo of Bobby looking at the book. As senior care workers, one of our aims is to enable meaningful, independent engagement, stimulating one's curiosity and imagination, so that residents do not have to sit feeling anxious or abandoned, staring into space, especially during transitions. We don't know how Bobby is experiencing the book, but it's clear that she's processing something from it and engrossed in the material. Overall, it's certainly better for Bobby to spend periods of transition in her day interacting with accessible, meaningful materials like this, rather than like this. In this picture, we see a helpless woman suffering from dementia, as they say. But in this picture, because she was offered something that was age appropriate and ability appropriate, we see a woman exercising her intelligence, curiosity, and independence. Dr. Josie Billington describes the transporting quality of reading in this way. She writes, "Reading is more than merely a distraction. It's an active engaging of the imagination as the words on the printed page stimulate their creativity and cause them to enter what is essentially an altered state of consciousness." So as we think about supporting self-directed reading for adults living with cognitive changes, let's examine our own conventional ideas about the actual act of reading. Generally, when we think about reading, we see it as fast, linear, silent, and solitary. If we stay within this rigid notion, then we are much less likely to open our minds to the possibility that the people we serve can read to some functional degree. So let's be creative about what reading can look like and how residents may wish to interact with the print material. An accessible book can serve as a friendly, inviting platform to be absorbed in whatever way the person is moved to do so. When interacting with a book, sometimes this readership will shift back and forth between pondering and reading aloud and expressing their reactions as they explore the material. They may well read in a less sequential fashion, starting in the middle, moving to the beginning, and then going to the end. As support staff and partners, we want to make sure we don't interrupt that focus and flow. It's a gift to the reader to allow the reader an experience that's spontaneous and organic. Unscripted, self-directed activities are important for us all, but especially for people dependent on the care of others. This woman is Roberta. In this video clip, you'll see she's quietly absorbed in studying an image in the book. You'll notice that the care staff with her does not interrupt or direct her in any way. After a few moments, Roberta begins working through each sentence. Roberta is living with fluent aphasia, so her spontaneous composition of words is unconventional and difficult to understand. You'll see that she skillfully uses the text to aid her speech and her personal expression. These are the pages that Roberta is looking at in the video. While again, the background is noisy, we're thankful to the activity person who stopped for a moment in her day to film this clip.
Salsa is one of the most common, I should say one of the most popular Latin dances. The energetic, spirited dance originated in the 70s, or I'd say the 97s, in the Caribbean, in terms of Cuba and Puerto Rico, which, well, actually, it's very well thought of too, and that's could be churches. I don't know if they think that way, but that's what I think. As a result, the salsa has become a very popular dance in New York. Well, I think something like that is really quite attractive in many ways, because it has become very popular dancing in New York City. Oh, you noticed that? I did. Well, this guy has big fingers, that's all I know. As a result, the salsa has become very popular dance in New York.
So you may see this as a rather messy, disorderly exchange. Is she reading? Is she talking? What's she saying? But if you focus on her affect, she's having a great time. This book is giving her a creative, organic, spontaneous experience where she's in charge, deciding when to ponder, when to read, when to reread, when to comment. This is certainly a person-centered, self-directed experience for Roberta. Of course, each resident's response to text is unique. As you provide reading opportunities for residents, you'll see that while some people become more gregarious with an adapted book, other people become quiet and fully engrossed, almost unaware of their surroundings. This could be simply their preferred style of reading, or it could be that cognitively they are unable to vacillate between socializing and reading. In any case, we want to, of course, respect and support this reader response. Now let's look at the documented benefits of reading. A nonprofit organization in the UK called the Reading Agency works to promote the benefits of reading among children and adults. In 2015, they published a literature review looking at the impact of reading for pleasure and empowerment. Based on research findings, they composed this outcomes map. The inner circle is personal outcomes, the middle is social outcomes, and the outer is external outcomes. As we look closely at the personal outcomes from reading, let's think of what these benefits could mean to an adult living with cognitive changes, especially a long-term care resident. Starting from the top, self-esteem, relaxation, knowledge of self and self-identity, creativity and imagination, focus and flow, enjoyment, escapism. An activity that naturally minimizes worry, stimulates the imagination, and centers oneself is of value to anyone. But these rich emotional health effects of leisurely reading take on a whole new level of import for someone who's living with declining memory and declining orientation. Now let's look closely at the middle circle, the one listing social outcomes. And again, think of these benefits for adults depending on the care of others. Things like self-expression, communication skills, relatedness, reduced dementia symptoms, reduced depressive symptoms. If reading for pleasure has the potential to enhance our lives in such rich fundamental ways, shouldn't we as a field be doing everything we can to kindle and support the act of recreational reading for adults living with cognitive changes? Shouldn't the people we serve be able to receive these benefits as well? Let's circle back for a moment to those 3 emotional plagues we spoke of earlier. Residents in long-term care are susceptible to experiencing devastating boredom, helplessness, and loneliness. We've seen how accessible books lessen boredom by engaging one's imagination, curiosity, emotions, and spirit. We've also seen how accessible books lessen feelings of helplessness by enabling residents to independently and successfully interact with the text and images, engineering their own experience without staff assistance. But can accessible reading lessen feelings of loneliness and social isolation? Can shared reading, or sometimes called interactive reading, enhance communication and social connectivity and draw people together? Let's look at this in the context of the quality of life model designed by International Council on Active Aging, which illustrates 7 dimensions of wellness. As you view this next video of 2 women, Charlotte and Elizabeth, enjoying a booklet together, keep in mind the intellectual, emotional, social, and vocational elements of the graph.
It's a chihuahua. Do you know what a chihuahua is? You don't know. Oh, you do know.
My aunt had one.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll finish that then. The Chihuahua is the smallest breed of dog. Now that's why it's this picture. Do you think we ever saw it? I don't think I've ever seen it. I wouldn't want to see this. no one is certain about the history of the Chihuahua.
With this resident-directed autonomous experience, Charlotte and Elizabeth are stimulating their intellectual, social, emotional, and vocational selves. They are socially connecting, helping each other, and contributing to the success and progression of the activity without any staff assistance. They are running the show. In addition, a peer friendship is blossoming, mitigating feelings of loneliness. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is another model for well-being and self-fulfillment. One would assume that for residents in long-term care, the bottom two categories of needs are being met. But what about belonging, esteem, and self-actualization? Meet Claudia, imprisoned by her great difficulty producing words and bewildered by her emotional lability, i.e. her minimal control over her emotions. Claudia had withdrawn from interacting with anyone. She was frightened by the strange words that came out of her mouth and the frequent, unpredictable flood of tears. But then an astute care staff member introduced Claudia to Andy. The staff member offered them a few engaging, accessible booklets and respectfully gave them the space and quiet to explore these materials together without staff direction. This is what happened.
Gone way up and
Oh, I've gone way up there, up in
yeah,
and up here, Wisconsin.
yeah.
I forget the names of different places, but this is, you may not know that Chicago is the third largest city in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
It is nicknamed the Windy City because if you've ever been there, you know that it's always windy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Chicago extends along the 26 miles of the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan.
Southwest shore.
That's the southwest shore. That's over here. Okay. And that's bordering Chicago, probably bordering Chicago. And Chicago's is 26 miles. Chicago extends along this right there. If you stand at the top of the Sears Tower, that's the Sears Tower, it's all the way up in the air.
Oh,
On the sky deck, you can see the 4 states.
This experience could be seen as nurturing that middle level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that is, their need to belong, to connect, and to contribute. In fact, though, I would also say that this autonomous engagement cultivated Claudia's and Andy's esteem and their self-actualization as well. Andy and Claudia were being challenged creatively in just the right way. They were thinking, problem solving, acting, and speaking to the best of their abilities. On a side note, Andy and Claudia started reading together regularly, and staff noticed that they tended to gravitate to each other in other situations as well, like meals and exercise. Although they were unable to converse without the aid of an adapted book, they had an emotional connection that most likely made them feel recognized, valued, and certainly less alone, all independent of staff direction. Another model depicting what we need for our inner health and well-being is Tom Kitwood's Flower of Needs. Looking at this next clip of Beverly and Anne, one sees how this kind of reading activity can foster, in Kitwood's words, attachment, comfort, identity, and inclusion. Although the woman on the left, Beverly, is unable to see the text or images, she enjoys these books immensely when read to her, especially when read to her by a peer. Unlike most published stories and articles, the language of an age-friendly book is comprehensible, the subject matter is relevant, and the content is impactful. Quality, adapted, age, and dementia-friendly books are often greatly appreciated by residents living with low vision.
patriotic songs.
Okay,
America, well,
beautiful.
yes, my country.
Tis of thee
Yes, that's right. The Stars and Stripes.
forever.
That's right, you know that. That's right. You want to turn the page.
Mm-hmm.
When you were able to see, did you like to read it all?
Yes, I wasn't a great reader, but yes, I read quite a bit, yeah.
I think it's a question of retaining what you read.
It's what?
I think you have to keep, remember what you read.
Radio,
Oh,
TV
way back then, yeah.
runs on 3 decades.
No.
I saw television coming in.
I don't
remember
get
when
that
they
one.
set, you know, they had a little 2-inch set.
Oh,
My grandparents,
A cigar smoker.
they thought it was a miracle to be able to, you know, turn like
Mary Gracie
better
Adams,
than the radio.
right.
George
Yeah,
Burke.
that was quite a thing when that came.
I remember.
So you see their communication isn't tidy or crystal clear, but the book is the bridge and the soil that stimulates and supports their conversation, enabling them to have an enjoyable time together with no staff assistance. The depth and breadth of Beverly's and Anne's preserved skills, qualities, and strengths are evident in this shared reading activity. Shared reading or interactive reading with easily accessible material can nurture peer friendships and melt away feelings of loneliness and social isolation. So I hope this talk has given you pause to do something that few individuals in our field are doing, and that is to consider leisurely reading for the sheer joy of reading, as a way to address in your work the universal need to belong, the desire to connect, and the longing to contribute. In my opinion, and I hope you now feel the same, we as a field are severely underestimating and often ignoring the reading capacities of people with dementia. So now, real quick, let's talk about the use of adapted reading in this time of COVID. With all the challenges that come with this pandemic, how can we integrate reading into residents' lives safely? Let's talk about visits. Before COVID, visits from the community at large were always welcome. However, sometimes those visits, whether with families, students, volunteers, children, could go flat. Visitors and residents often struggle to think of things to talk about and to keep the conversation going. Before COVID, sharing an adapted book was a great way to add substance to any visit. The book provided the scaffolding for genuine social interaction and took the pressure off of both parties to come up with something to talk about. In the current times, with this pandemic, many residents have more access to tablets and iPads. Furthermore, many people, families, students, volunteers, are stepping up to remotely visit residents via video. But just like in person, visiting a resident via video can be a bit strained as both parties strive to think of things to talk about. We found that during COVID, that sharing accessible print and text with a resident via video results in a much more successful remote visit. A family member, volunteer, student can use a booklet during a live interactive video call with a resident. Or the visitor can make a recording of him or herself reading aloud and commenting on the book, and then send that video to the staff or the resident. The resident can then view that personalized video as they wish multiple times. For those interested, I have a short example video clip of me sharing a book with a resident via video. If you contact me with a request, I'm happy to send it to you. It can be a helpful aid when explaining to families, volunteers, and students how they may use an accessible book on video to connect with a resident. Further addressing this time of COVID, we at Reading to Connect offer the option of printing our books on washable paper that can be disinfected between uses. In addition, we offer age and dementia-friendly audiobooks and ebooks. Our ebooks can be viewed on tablets, TVs, and other devices. Before concluding this talk, I'd like to say that in general, I don't necessarily view accessible reading for people living with cognitive changes as reading therapy or as a therapeutic intervention. I think recreational reading for long-term care residents should be viewed as a universally human, natural part of one's day, like eating and socializing. This viewpoint is exemplified in this next video clip. This is Barbara. Barbara lives in a skilled nursing residence. Initially, Barbara's family described her as someone who read her whole life but can't read anymore. However, once care staff determined what kind of print material Barbara needed in order to revive her reading abilities, the family was overjoyed. Barbara as well was thrilled to have recreational reading as a natural, inherent part of her day, just as in her past. This clip shows us an example of how reading can be integrated into the day and how a skilled nursing resident can be happily engaged, expanding her mind, doing what she loves, all without needing staff direction.
God hope could speak on many topics. Religion, quote, the good news is Jesus is coming back. The bad news is he's really ticked off. Aging.
Barbara's husband expressed it best when he said, "With these books, she feels like herself again." So in conclusion, let's remember, loss of reading does not happen overnight. It's a gradual and long process. It should not be inevitable that people with dementia enter into a literary abyss as soon as typical newspapers, magazines, and books become inaccessible. As one individual living with Alzheimer's disease wrote, "Thank God for Dr. Alzheimer. He understood the dead part of me. Now we all have to understand the alive part of me." And one last pitch. Aging adults are not the only ones who benefit from accessible reading material. We all benefit. Books that residents can absorb and interact with and manage by themselves can be windows to who they really are behind their disease. When discussing literature, aging adults express views, landscapes, and voices that one would not hear from other age groups. And what a gift to us. So thank you very much for your time. Again, please contact Pam, AGE-u-cate, or myself with questions, insights, and discoveries you may have on this topic. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. I know every time I see these videos and photos, I'm smiling and I'm shaking my head, and I know many of you are doing the same thing. And I look back onto when I had the privilege of seeing Reading to Connect in action, and I went from just great joy and smiles to seeing the resident connections and the amazing transformational power of these books, to really being in tears at points, because it was so touching to see these people really come alive. And so this is why we have connected with Susan Ostrowski and her Reading to Connect program. It is amazing. We had a couple questions that I want to ask you, Susan. Certainly one was, how do we get the books? And I responded on the chat that call us. It's part of a program where you can have the training with it. Everything is virtual now, as you know, putting it on iPads. So there's lots of different options on how we can deliver the program and the books and whatnot. So you do need to just reach out. Susan, are the books in Spanish?
No, they're not in any other language but English, and that's like going up in my to-do list. I really, really need to get on that.
That's a not yet. And also any poetry, somebody asked.
Sure, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out and contact Susan and she can tell you more about it. We're going to be posting an interview between us so you can hear about a little bit more about the backstory of compassion or Reading to Connect, and really the vision that Susan has for this, and how and why she created it. Her story is really remarkable, and again, she is so passionate, as you all can tell. So thank you, Susan. It was a great presentation.
Thanks. Thank you.
I just want to take 2 minutes and tell you all about next month's road trip. We're going to be talking about a subject much more serious than this, but on the top of our minds, anyone in aging services, and that is labor trends, the future of recruitment and retention. As we all know, the economy changed nearly overnight with COVID, with employment shifting from an all-time high to a Great Depression low. So we are honored to have Maggie Keene. She is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for My CNA Jobs, talk about caregiver and retention trends and exploring what rules have changed, what has stayed the same, and what we need to do to attract and retain the best workers to build a truly differentiated experience for your organization. So important now. For those who register, you will be one of the first to receive our newly released white paper, AGE-u-cate's newly released white paper on Reveal Aging, workforce retention for the aging services providers, providing our support on the research that has supported our training initiatives that are again researched how we need to prepare for training the workforce of today and tomorrow. So that is Wednesday, October 21st at 1 Central Standard Time. And then we also have an additional webinar coming up on the 29th with our great partners at James L. West Center for Dementia Care here in Fort Worth. Another topic very relevant to all of us at this time, the heartbreak and cost of isolation, strategies for coping during the pandemic. And this will be presented by one of their lead education team members, Holly Glover, who is a board certified licensed counselor, and just a very relevant topic. We all already have lots registered for this. So you will get some more reminders on this and information on the October program on labor trends. So we look forward to you joining us again. And Susan, thank you so much for sharing this amazing program. And we can't wait to get it out to more of the world. So we look forward to talking to all of you. And thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and take good care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.